But we literally was expecting them.
I'm gonna shout out, but everyone please hear. Direction of our Ellen Burns.
Hey, they'll even deal with us.
No, this week, a guy by the name of Casey Jones was born. And how many of you remember the name of Casey Jones? Good, well-known railroad engineer, ran for the Illinois Central.
Yes.
Known for his whistle and the fact that he always got there on time. He set themselves by his arrival. Well, in the year 1900, he left the train. He left his last stop 75 minutes behind schedule, and he was headed for New Orleans, bound and determined to make up the time. So he was cannonballing down the road there between 70 and 75 miles an hour when in the wee hours of the morning, in the fog in the head, he saw the red light of a stolen freight train that was not scheduled to be there. And so he immediately slammed his wheels into reverse, pulled down the whistle, the horn, and pulled the whistle down, and the car came in and told the firemen to jump before they hit. 300 feet before they impacted, the firemen jumped, and they rolled into the rear end of that freight train doing about 35 to 40 miles an hour, and he was instantly killed. Nobody else has suffered a fatality. And his story is, of course, the stuff of story and legends and ballads ever since Johnny Cash has sung it and all that sort of thing. But Casey Jones was born 160 years ago this week. And so they checked his watch after they recovered his body, and he would stop the instant that they impacted. And he was only 2 minutes behind schedule. Casey Jones. I picked out the only railroad songs I know of that are songs with on page 12. Page 12. I've been working on the railroad. Being a railroad town, we ought to be able to really do justice to this song. The honor of Casey.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, join me in prayer or meditation, if you please, as I say, bless this food to our use and us to thy service. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an extra feature at the buffet today. And I am happy to point your attention to these beers, one of which, a brown one in the middle, is the award-winning porter that was made, of course, all of them were made here at the brewery. But this one beat out more than 80 beers from more than 40 breweries. It really is good. It's a porter, on the heavy side. One porter, it's It's relatively light. Cost is $5 per can. We're on the honor system. There's a basket right next to it, so please, $5 right in there. And we're going to have a varying. This is going to be a weekly feature, we think. Just trying it out, and the menu of beers will vary. There is a lager, an IPA, and a porter. So hopefully it spans the spectrum of tastes. Come on, folks, guests and ladies first. The buffet is open.
First, you got it quickly. It was like yesterday. So. Thank you.
Very much. I just wanted to read them and notify everyone that I spoke.
You got it all over my speech. So you don't need notice.
Okay, so it's time for burger. We're going to have an interesting presentation from Ralph Dodd talking about local agriculture. And let's start with happy dollars. Who is happy today? Bill Payne.
I am really happy to, and I'm including Jackie on this, so it's $20 between Jackie and me.
Whoa!
Whoa.
Because
That's $17.50 from you and $2 from Jack.
get out, because my bud, Bill Murphy, is back to work. I have to balance that a little bit. And this is a little somber. I talked to Reggie yesterday, and my impression is Reggie is really struggling.
Sorry.
But I'm sorry to report that, but I think we ought to know.
Please keep Reggie in your prayers, but also keeping them in mind. I'm sure that he would appreciate calls. And I chatted with him last week, and it seemed to bring his spirits up. And I think that probably more than anything, that's what he needs. To feel like all the wonderful good work that he has done and the friendships he has sown have not gone to it, and he is remembered. Thank you, Karen.
Oh, Clyde has dollars because I'm a member of the club.
Oh, yeah. But to facilitate with $5, would you please join me here for just a moment? And I would like to, yes, she's absolutely correct. The end of that little announcement period is now over, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the club a new member, and I hope that you will wear this with pride. And if you don't wear it on Tuesdays, it will cost you. And thank you for the happy dollar. Welcome to the club. Katie?
I'll get $10.
Whoa.
I'm so happy as the chair of the membership committee. I've done absolutely nothing, and we continue to grow.
We now have 42 members, and when last time in DAC-DB, and at the time this was the time we officially only had 40 members, we were still the largest club on the shore. Onancock had 37 members, and Exmoor was around 29. So thank you all. And of course, size is not the true measure of the club. The real measure is in the impact that we have on the community. And this has been an amazing year, thanks primarily to Invisible History and All District Reads, which are both going hot and heavy, and lots of little things that are, or other things that are going on with the club. So thank you. Ben, Bill, Bob.
Been that long.
Got 25 happy. 20 because I'm so glad to be back with everybody and I'm feeling better. It's kind of slow, but I'm getting there and the news is all upbeat. So very, very pleased and happy.
Excellent.
And the other 5 is in honor of Reggie because despite everything that he's facing right now, he thought enough to call me the other day. So,
Wow. Wow. Bravo.
I'll remember Reggie. Wish him the best. It's tough.
I would like to put $10 into the basket, and the first $5 is for our guest today, and of course I mean Mr. Burns. And also putting $5 in. I wrote my first editorial for the Post. So watch on Friday for our hard hitting story about Whitland sex.
I didn't know about Bill's thing, actually see Bill and even Jackie. Jackie was so happy there. I've never seen him greet me. I want to welcome Tim John Davis. I heard about this, and I want to say Alan from a railroad family. My grandpa was a conductor. 2 uncles were engineers. My dad was a fireman, and I was a Gandy dancer. And I am writing a book about Gandy dancer memories. That's what I'm doing when I'm screwing around this meeting. Nice to be back. Oh, $5 in that bunch for Graham. I don't know why he's not here. He's the only one that's got a team that's going in the tournament. Maybe he's drunk and not paying attention. I don't know. But I'm happy to be back. I've been busy with government documents.
Good. Welcome back. Thank you. $25? I think it was 25 or 75. $25. Okay, thank you very much. All right. Now I have one additional membership announcement, and that is to have the pleasure to announce Bill Baggett has been approved for membership, and this begins his 1 week, the announcement period. If anyone has any valid reasons that he should not be a member, please let me know. But what I hope to see next week is the announcement of his joining the club officially.
Was that Paul's, yes?
Yeah, Paul's.
Yes. Let's see here. I think that's it.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Elizabeth Russell knows our speaker quite well. In fact, the owner of Eastern Shore Custom Carts happens to be the daughter of Mr. Dodd, and I'm sure is here to cheer him on.
Oh,
So-
he's here to heckle him.
Yeah.
Expected face. All right, I think then that brings us to time for the Queen of Hearts drawing.
All right, I'm coming up to get my money.
29.
Ace of clubs.
Paul, we have 29. Oh dear.
Oh, spades.
Oh,
You're taking.
They both have spades.
what do you got? I got mine first.
Yeah, draw again.
Oh. I know splitting.
All right.
Oh,
What is my friend?
Hey, Kim, I call foul. I paid for his card.
He did pay for my car, well, I only had $1. Give him $1.
All right, you give it to Kim. We're gonna get that extra space back from you. Both of them. He brings one every week. Right. Jackie makes a whole $7. What are you gonna do with it, Jackie? Oh, you free.
Yeah, what?
You're cutting into Ralph's time.
Get up here, I like that.
Everybody likes it.
Pot's over $110. No. Hate a spade.
I'd like to that she didn't draw the clear fire. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Ralph Dodd and to speak about what Elizabeth was like growing up.
Most of this here to make sure that most of my statements are accurate. We enjoy joking about her grandmother, Lit's mother, always never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So anyway, Jim and I couldn't quite remember what he asked me to speak on, so I was thinking he wanted me to talk on the changes in agriculture that I've seen in Northampton County in my lifetime.
Go for it.
So I've got a bunch of fun facts. I've been reading way too much about this, and some things cycles that I came across that I found interesting that kind of have a way of repeating themselves. So starting back in the 1600s, salt from the Eastern Shore was given credit for saving the Jamestown settlement. They were having trouble collecting enough, so a lot of what they used came from here. In the 1600s, we were primarily grew tobacco here, and it's funny how some of these trends abruptly end, if you can believe, you want to believe the history. But around 1660, it was basically over, and livestock dominated for the next 50 years or so. Cattle, salted beef, and hides were the biggest cash crop. So in the early 1700s, here comes grain and corn. And the coasting trade company shipped it from Nova Scotia, shipped Eastern Shore grain to as far north as Nova Scotia, as far south as the West Indies. So that dominated maybe for one of the longest, had the longer cycle. After the Civil War and the expansion of the railroad, the Eastern Shore grain was obviously moving by rail and less by ship. But in the 1880s, they had developed lines from Illinois, and we were being undersold
in Baltimore by Illinois grain than what we could do right here. To me, that being a grain producer, being involved in it basically my lifetime, I find some of these facts interesting. But the golden years are maybe the most that more has been written about. And that started 1880, 1890, and abruptly ended in 1927. I'll explain that in a second. But from the mid 1800s to 1900, potatoes, which were king for a long period in there, the production went from like 60,000 bushels on the store to like 1,250,000. Went up 21-fold over that 50-year period. So it's obvious people were learning how to produce more people were getting into it. The rail made it, I guess it was more dependable to get the product where it needed to be delivered. Around 1900, one of the first agricultural co-ops was started on the shore, the Eastern Shore Produce Exchange. So what was neat about that was they started branding then. The Red Star brand was their premium brand, and it was sought after because they started to sort of enforce quality control. It was started, with what I found was like a $16,000 capital investment. In their first year, they had $1 million in sales. So in 5 years, they were up to 2 million. And after 12, 13 years, they were over $10 million. And that was white potatoes, sweet potatoes, cabbage, and strawberries were their big thing. So the sort of the end of, well, not the end, but in 1915, Accomack County had the highest per capita income in the United States.
Is that because you have more people investing? More producers? Or is it the same small group?
I think, well, I'm sure it was more. And I think clearing more land, opening more agricultural acres, I think production practices improving. They dominated that market going north, which we had some of the historians say that a lot of the roads, whatever, were destroyed in the Civil War. Not much was destroyed here. So our guys were already, they still had their equipment, and it was, that learning process from the 50s to 1900, you may say somewhat uninterrupted, allowed them to get their foot first. But this didn't last long, which to me was one of the, this is typical of agriculture. I've witnessed it firsthand. So in 15, we are kind of not going to climb much higher. So what do? We grow more, we produce more. In 1927, we just crazy overproduce, the market crashes and burns. The price just plummets. So the next year in 28, we have an unusual weather, and 11 states are bringing their potatoes to market at the same time. So we've got back-to-back years, of low prices, and in 29, lots of these guys are out of business. So, and it's funny, I'd like to find out more about that weather that year in 1928. Because I have seen that a few times with string beans, like it'll get cool in the spring and they'll just sit there. And so it lets other states that maybe have planted later than we have, the crop catch up with each other. And I've seen us get killed before, just too many states coming to market at one time with fresh produce. So jumping up to when I was a kid, I started working on the farm for my uncle. It's a good thing there weren't child labor laws. Maybe they were, and we were exempt. But I mean, I remember hoeing, pulling weeds. I remember my cousins. I had one. They were both girls. One's younger, one's a little bit older. You can remember us all getting on the same Jensen weed, taking all three of us to pull them up. And we would do this, a few hours a day till we finished the field. And our parents, they would get us out of there if it was crazy hot. But back then, nutgrass was a big problem. And we would literally just camp out and, try to get all that up. So I don't know if we're all, positive memories, but we didn't know any different. We helped pack tomatoes as children, and we would often, they would use, Climax baskets. They'd use decorative baskets to make them more attractive. So we would be responsible for making sure the prettiest tomatoes were on top. To get somebody in those days, cucumbers, tomatoes, sweet corn, peas. Oh, I had a little sweet corn hustling business as a child. I could only go on certain blocks, pulling my little red wagon, hustling sweet corn. We'd go to my uncle's pickup pile, and mom or dad would take me out there and we'd put corn in the trunk or whatever, and I'd hustle it around Cape Charles. And it's funny how I remember some of these conversations when I was 10 years old of people complaining about our prices. So some things never change. But May peas were big here. Pickles, potatoes already mentioned, string beans, collards, broccoli, asparagus, cabbage, peppers, squash, multiple kinds of squash. Snake squash, yellow, green squash, spinach. On Parsons Circle, there was this Northampton Growers had a spinach grater where that's all they graded in that grater. And tomatoes. Tomatoes were everywhere. And it's funny because I've been thinking a lot about this the last couple of weeks, riding to places, these what were small fields in the day, and now may have a house, or some of them are grown up and they're just grass. But a lot of guys that had other jobs farmed a lot of these little fields, and there were a lot of cucumbers. I'm sure Mr. Godwin well remembers. But a lot of guys, that's how families made it, was having all these little side hustles, and everything was farmed. I mean, there wasn't any land left out when I was a kid. It was just all these types of vegetables. And the markets, I mean, Northampton Growers, which we have for sale right now, if anybody's interested. But there were lots of truck brokers that would come to the field. The produce was loaded like right on the end of the rows, and they would take it to markets up north. But there were lots of outlets, and there were a lot, just crazy amount of people that worked in this business, just moving this produce to get it to where it needed to be. And I remember guys as kids talking that,
may have worked at Webster's would have a 6-wheel truck, and they would haul produce at nighttime and take it to the markets, and deliver it, and it was just, it just seemed like everybody did more than just one thing in those days. So, so growing up, and I noticed this as a child because labor laws started to become, legal aid started to, come out and start busting on people because they were putting, migrant labor and substandard housing. And so this was a big change when the labor stopped coming to Northampton and Accomack counties. And I'm not saying some of that wasn't necessary, but the regulation, and I want to bring it because it's what's happening now with food safety. I mean, some of these regulations are just absolutely ridiculous. Like Elizabeth and Will's dog, Maisie, is not allowed in the string bean field. Now, you tell me, now we may have 300 deer out there, but you cannot legally take an animal. And I tell you, our dog, it was Elizabeth's dog, Tip, watched us eat raw string beans in the field, and that dog thought she was a cow, and she just, well, if y'all gonna eat them, I'm gonna eat them. And it's crazy how now, how things have changed and maybe gone a little too far. But what's killed us or killed those markets is all that regulation, and it put the brakes on. And as a kid, those fields, and maybe I was a young teenager, but those cucumber fields started to disappear because guys were too worried about getting busted because maybe there's not a hand washing station out in a little 4-acre cucumber field that was, sort of in somebody's backyard. But I was talking to Steve Sturgis, and we're farm buddies. We own a lot of equipment together, and he was talking about, the 70s. To him, that was when it really changed, because a lot of those vegetables disappeared. And here we go back in this other cycle. Here we are back growing wheat, corn, and soybeans. They were our major crops. We still grew potatoes, still growing string beans, but everything had to go to a grader, be graded. A lot of the string beans, they switched to hydrocooling everything because we had a 1-row picker when I was, I guess that was the late 80s. I mean, Elizabeth remembers that, and we would pick spring and fall string beans. But what we did was we planted butter beans in the summer, and as long as school was going on, or school was out, excuse me, butter beans were a hot vegetable for us. We delivered them. We sent a truck across the bay twice a week, and we had 6 or 7 regular customers that wanted fresh butter beans. Interesting story about that. While I'm not in the field, a USDA inspector finds our field, and how he found it, I don't know. He buys a bushel of butter beans from my guys, and 30 days later, I get the local guy, the sort of the chemical inspector. He comes in and shuts our butter bean operation down. And I'm like, and he has this chemical name that's this long. And he said, we found this trace in your crop. And well,
we planted butter beans every week. We plant maybe 3 acres. And I mean, they were so long gone what he had bought. So, but he tried to flex his muscles and state, you can't pick anymore. We've got, he goes out there with rubber gloves. And I said, you got to tell me what that chemical is. It was Bravo, which is maybe one of the most generic fungicides that's been used probably in my lifetime. It's still used today. It's very safe. But the issue was when, as it took us maybe a couple of days, the airplane pilot, Wendy Bloat, was spraying for me, and not spraying Bravo. I think he'd been spraying that on peanuts, maybe for John Nottingham. He thought, well, heck, it will help your butter beans, which it would. And it was a little bit of trace left in the plane. And so he left it in there and mixed whatever insecticide or whatever he was spraying for us. But the issue was the slang term butterbean is not on the chemical label. The words baby lima are on there. And so I file a complaint with the Department of Agriculture that you've got these inspectors coming out here that don't even properly identify something. And you're trying to shut me down. Their answer to me was, you need to sue the aerial applicator. And I said, well, number one, he's a friend, and that he is one person that's out here that's trying to help me make it. He is the last guy I'm suing. So anyway, but it's funny how that it almost got that one guy fired, because I went to the Board of Agriculture and I said, there's no way things like this should happen to growers that are honestly, when we could have had 10 times that amount of trace and it would have been perfectly fine. But you got guys that are carrying a badge, wearing a gun, and
Really?
just, but anyway,
They don't know what they're doing.
they don't know what they're
With a gun.
So, the big changes, in those days, as a kid, there were people planting with 1, 2, 3, 4 row planters. When you saw a 6-row planter, boy, you thought that was gigantic. We have a 32-row planter now. Irrigation, big changes. We went from solid set sprinklers to solid set guns to soft hose traveling guns to hard hose traveling guns to pivots. And it's crazy. The pivots, a lot of them are designed based on the soil absorption, so there's no runoff. It's all about being more efficient, more practical. Are you cutting me off?
We have questions, Ralph.
Let me tell you a couple things about Northampton. I went to the most recent ag census, and Northampton County ranks in the state of Virginia #1 in vegetable production still today. We're #1 in aquaculture, and we are #2 in crop sales, which surprised me.
Oh, wait a minute, what is crop sales? Because those
Total crop sold.
total crop sales.
Yeah. Accomack County is 5th in crop sales. And they've got a lot more acres than we do, as you know. They are #1 in grain sales, and which something surprised me, all the conversation, they are #4 in poultry sales with $112 million. This was 5 years ago, so I know that number's a lot bigger. And my last 2 comments was, I asked Elizabeth, I said, tell me what's the biggest difference you see, in your lifetime. And I don't know if it's having a lot less to be able to eat, but a whole lot less vegetables. The only thing we grow now are string beans for what was the Colson operation. We grow spring and fall. About
60 or so acres, each season. And the number of employees, because in the summertime, I'd have maybe sometimes 3 to 5 high school kids working for me, as well as 3 adults. Now I have 2 adults and and they do more, and we're doing more acres, with a lot less people. But the difference I see is those little 35 horsepower tractors that I started on cultivating, as probably a 12-year-old kid, to now the tractors are whatever number you want horsepower. I mean, we have 2 tractors that are like 275 horsepower, 4-wheel drive, dual wheels all the way around. One has self-guidance that will steer itself.
The air conditioning too.
It's got to be air conditioned to maintain the climate for the computers in the game. When we hook up, Steve and I, in this 32-row planter together, you wouldn't believe the number of screens that are in there. The thing knows where it's planted. You can accurately adjust the seed on the fly. It has a vacuum system that sucks seed up on the plate. It's got an air system that blows seed to each little row unit, so you don't vary the amount of weight in the row unit. You all right, honey? Has an air compressor system because each row has an air bag on it for down pressure. It's crazy how accurate how we have gone from like wasting seed as a child and fertilizer and chemicals to accurately placing everything. So that's the big difference I see. With all this technology, it's crazy expensive. The clutches we put on our planter so it won't plant where it's already planted is $25,000.
Oh. Maintains that. Know that.
We do most of it.
Do you?
Yeah, we have our own tech manuals. I'm the electrical guy on most of all the electronic problems. But actually we have tech manuals for most everything we have. And some of them are question.
Real quick, you don't have to go. AI, you think it's gonna take over too for your people? AI. Oh. Computers.
It's already doing it.
But what I meant is just to look at the screen, right? Not to do anything.
Yeah, because people say, well, that thing's you got too many screens to look at and be worrying about keeping a row straight. When that thing can accurately plant and not overlap and not skip, and but because that way you can monitor if something's going wrong before it goes wrong. You can see each row, what each row is doing. It's.
But for a technician to come out and plug in the computer, it's like $1,000.
And all this all the software is proprietary, like John Deere. Nothing but lawsuits. You probably read about that. Because a lot of these big farmers, they've got their own mechanics and they can't get the software to fix their own equipment. John Deere wants you to hire them. That's the first thing they come to one of our tractors is hook a laptop to it. It's like an automobile.
Thank you. Now, when you come back and tell us what he would like in the track.
I'll be 2 meetings saying it's like that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, everybody up. And it's true. Is it better? Stand. Fun. Have a good week.
No, those two.
Yeah, great presentation. Thank you.
Here it is. I know you've read the book.